Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are now floating in Screamacelica. My name's Kevin Graham, and as usual, I'm joined by Russell Boyce. Russell, what's happening, my man?
Well, it is happening, my man. I was a wee bit more rushed than normal this week, but just about managed to get my shirt on in time, Kev. You know, you didn't want me doing these Screamacelica slots topless, mate. That is not. I think we'd be strictly audio if that was the case, man. You know?
Aye, definitely. I mean, somebody says in the comments yesterday I look like Tam Cowan, which or either I was trying to be Tam Cowan.
You're trying to be him, I think it was. I seen that.
I was trying to be. No, I've got to say tonight. Are you trying to be Cat Slater? That's a bit Cat Slater, Bette Gilroy. That shirt. You need to talk us through that one.
I just don't know. I mean, it's the same. It's the same every time, mate. I had it for years. It's in the archives. I've got a few to get through for the Screamacelica shows, so it's strictly shirts for the music and Celtic pod, man. Strictly shirts, mate.
Brilliant. We need the dress code, eh? We actually do need a dress code. Now, we're back in the DeLorean and we're firing it up to 88 mile an hour.
Yeah.
And we've been hit with the flashing lights and that, and we've ended up back in Kilmarnock on the 15th of October 2011. So we've ended up in, I think it's a Safeway car park outside Rugby Park. I'm not 100% sure. Somebody will keep me right. So we've got out the DeLorean and we're walking to Rugby Park. And as we're walking to Rugby Park, we're already 10 points behind the Mr. Sleekit himself, Ali McCoist, Rangers. Now, Ali McCoy, I'm going to stick on. I'm going to say this, but did you see him doing the video about covering your mouth and talking? Did you see him doing the video on TalkSport about how hypocritical is that? He was the Sleekit get actually invented that, when he says it to Neil Lennon, So for him to come on and say that for me was well in order. Well, away for that. So we're 10 points behind Rangers going into this game, and it's an early kick-off. And the Celtic teams went through quite a lot of changes. Neil Lennon's new in his second season as manager. And in the summer, we had lost Andreas Hinkel. Great player for me, a quality fullback.
Yeah.
Freddie Lundberg, we had let Freddie Lundberg go. Never really done much for us,
Didn't mention that, man. Didn't mention. That's too upsetting still to talk about yet.
How do we need to get a hold?
It was a sad day when he left, mate. It was a sad day when he left. He brought a lot to the table.
He did. Maybe it was cutlery or the water in the table. I didn't bring much onto the pitch. Who else left? Darren O'Dea left. He went to Leeds United. Which is strange. Niall McGinn moved to Brentford.
Yeah,
Sean Maloney had went to Wigan. Morten Rasmussen, do you remember Morten Rasmussen?
I do. Rasmussen.
he went to Turkey. And Hughes Huivid went to Holveld. I think it was Huivid. I think that's how he says it. Was it no Huivid? Well,
no.
He went to Southampton.
Yes.
Which is a very, very strange move.
I never see that these days. They Celtic players going to Southampton.
No.
Oh, so unusual.
At that time it was unusual, no anymore. So we had brung in Adam Matthews, Kelvin Wilson, Dylan McGeoch. Big Fraser had returned for his second loan spell. Victor Wanyama, Badir El Kaddouri, Andre Blackman, and later on we actually we ended up bringing in Lustig, Rabun Ibrahim, I think that says. I can't read
the Israeli centre back.
No, he was Nigerian. He was a winger.
Who?
Rabu Ibrahim. It was a wee winger. And Paweł Brozic.
Yes.
He was a Polish striker as well. But we're also bringing another striker, and we're going to talk about this other striker later on once we get after this game. We also spent £2.4 million on Mohamed Bangura, which we need to discuss more in depth later on. So we turned up to Rugby Park that day. 6,000 days turned up to Rugby Park that day. And we ended up 3-0 down at half-time. It's over. We're 10 points behind Rangers with a game in hand. Do you remember why we had that game in hand?
No.
We had that game in hand because we decided to go to Dublin and play Inter Milan in the Dublin Super Cup.
That does ring a bell.
A week after the season started. The season started earlier because 2012, the Euros in 2012. So we played Hibs in the first game. Then we had a week off because we went to Dublin and played Inter Milan and a League of Ireland select.
Yes.
We got beat 2-0 off Inter Milan and what has been described as a bad-tempered game. I can't remember anything about it. I can't even remember watching it. So we also played Inter Milan later on, I think, in what was that tournament? The Champions Cup or something like that. Did we not play Inter Milan in Galway or Limerick or Cork years later? I'm sure we did. I'm talking rubbish now, probably. So this game, we're going to Rugby Park. We're 3-0 down at half time. Yeah. This is after getting bombed out by Leon as well, right? So no, Leon, Sion. It rhymes. It does rhyme. So I'm letting myself away with that.
Leon would have been a wee bit more credible, you know,
than Sion, but that got overturned because they didn't sign up 8, didn't they? Improperly registered player.
That's a good way of putting it.
Imagine a club getting hammered for having an improperly registered player. That never happens in Scotland, does it?
Never heard of anything, especially I've never heard of any punishments getting handed down for that. Come on, that's surely powerful.
Especially when it lasted about 10 years. I mean, imagine improperly registering players for 10 years and not getting punished. That's unbelievable, that, eh? Really?
Wouldn't happen here.
No, the SFA would be on top of that, definitely. So, the Celtic team that day, that's 3-0 down at half-time, is Fraser Foster, Daniel Mastorovic, Chad Uree, Charlie Mulgrew, Adam Matthews, Joe Ledley, Ki Sung Young, Kayal, Tony Stokes, James Forrest, Gary Hooper. That's the team that started that game. Yep. Now, I've got to admit here, I never saw this game because I was on a plane flying home from Tenerife. So I'm up in the sky, not knowing what's going on. And
blissfully ignorant, Kev. Blissfully
ignorant what was actually happening. What was your feelings during this game?
Oh, I remember it so well because it was actually me who suggested it this week for a wee change, Kev. Because I do think, and we'll go into it all, just how colossal a level of importance I think this game ended up having on so many more levels than just that season, I think, as well. Do you know what I mean? Because it was obviously such a game. We were on the brink. I watched it. I was only into so I'd had my own pub for about 15 months by then. And I can remember the girlfriend at the time, I took her up the tune shopping in the morning. I was working at night that day. And I remember we went and got McDonald's, and then it was about 5 minutes before kickoff. So instead of getting a train back, jumped in a taxi so we could watch it, at the pub. Whilst I did kidded on, I was doing paperwork or some nonsense like that. Do you know what I mean? I was probably just sampling the beer, making sure the lines were all good for the night ahead. Busy weekend ahead, mate. You've got to taste the stock. Stock control, mate. Quality control, that's it. Quality control, that's it.
And obviously, before anybody puts it in the comments, you mean the lines of beer and nothing else.
That was the only lines I was trying on a Saturday lunchtime with my McDonald's, absolutely. How things come out wrong. You knew all about it.
Definitely.
But yeah, it was like, I remember at half time just being, that way of feeling completely numb as to go, I don't even know what to say, like it's over already. You need to remember this was so early in the season, 15th of October, and the year before we'd just been beaten the final day. Okay, Rangers Cup come out the final day the year before, right? But that's when Lennon spoke about, it's not over by a long shot and all that, and they got us all G'd up. And the team the year before they'd given you a lot of belief, hadn't they? I felt they had. I know that we probably should have won the league the year before, let's be honest, but that's another conversation as well. I think we really felt, do you know what? See now, like a lot of the players are settled, few additions, we'll romp that, because they were an aging side we were against as well. And yet before October, or 10 points behind, some of the new signings already were getting a wee bit of, shall we say, question marks over their head, a wee bit of doubt, such as Caree, I remember in particular. And was that the season we had the other winger guy? Who was the other winger?
Badir El Kadouri.
No, I thought he was a fullback. I'm sure we had like a winger sort of forward player. Anyway, it doesn't matter. There was a couple of them getting questioned. But Picasso, was it?
Oh no, that was Dyler. That was Dyler Picasso.
Was it? Anyway,
Did he not score?
I've not got a clue, man.
Did he not? Did Picasso no score in Salzburg in the 2-2 draw? Scotland and Picasso scored in Salzburg in the 2-2 draw on the day of the Scottish independence referendum, because I was working at the referendum. So
I didn't know all that. But so anyway, there was a few of the signings anyway getting some question marks to say, like, some questions asked of them. Have they really added to the squad? What's going on here? The pressure was under Lennon massively, because his squad over the 2 or 3 windows he'd had by then as well hadn't been assembled particularly cheaply, because we all knew it was big wages he'd paid out to get the likes of your Joe Legleys and stuff. I genuinely felt that day at half-time just completely like, that way, like your stomach's flipped a wee bit. I felt sick. I just felt, this is it. It's got to be gone. And to be honest with you, even at that point, you go, I don't see them drawing, but even if they draw, it's not enough anyway, because we're that far behind. We already, what it's like with Celtic and Rangers, Kev. We're going to need to win every game left. That's what you're saying back in October. We're going to need to win every single game, otherwise we won't win the league. For them to turn it back round in that second half, though, was when you realised, I felt anyway, that the players really were playing for Lennon, in fairness, that spell that he had in charge. Perhaps maybe a wee bit unlike the most recent one. But I certainly felt that the players were playing for Lennon, and that turnaround, it was a great feeling. But I'll be honest to you, revisionism is something that we spoke about before on this, and you look back and obviously you do realise, of course, with hindsight, all the different reasons as to why it was so important. But I think my overriding feeling, if I remember correctly, at full time, Kev, was we're still gubbed. like it's still not, like we're not, this is no, it does. I know it was great that they've turned it around to a draw, but realistically, the league's now a real long shot. Do you know what I mean?
You would have said that at that point. You definitely would have said it at that point, even at full time. What Lennon says to them at half time, seemingly says to them at half time, you're embarrassing the club and I'm going to be out of your job. Just go out and do what you have to do. That sounds basically what he's been telling the players ever since. So they went out, and it's a strange game. It is a strange game, because for half an hour Celtic do nothing. Absolutely nothing. They don't look like getting back into it. You can actually see when you watch the highlights now that there wasn't a big Celtic support there that day anyway. But no. you can actually see gaps in the crowd getting bigger and bigger the longer the setting. the longer the second half goes on. Roy Croppy, I nearly left at half-time for the pub, but the old Celtic dad defiance kicked in. That's what I love. I love that. Because I would have been the exact same if I was there. I said, I'm staying to the end. I'm not going to the pub. Well,
do you know, that just touches on as well what Paul John Dykes was saying on one of the Celtic bulletins not long ago. Say the beauty of Celtic fans is we do have an amazing ability to sort of take the piss at ourselves. You know what I mean? Oh, sorry, but you know what I mean. Like take the mic at ourselves. We do. Yeah. We've got the ability to do that. Even there, you know, that comment there from the viewer, that's brilliant, Pat. Do you know what I mean? The old Celtic dad kicked in, and that's why I stayed. Love that.
I've been in that state of mind many times myself. I'm no leaving. I'm staying to the end. Stuff like that, like 4-0 down at Ibrox and stuff like that. I've actually just stood there and like gave them the.
Really?
On the way out, oh yeah, you can't leave, eh? You can't leave, you can't do that. That's against the grain, man. That's pure Celtic daft. Not like all these youngins who will actually leave at half time and stuff like that and go to the pub. Two of their goals that day, Big Foster was terrible for two of them, and this was before he became the goalkeeper we all grew to love. We were in an absolute horrible away kit. That away kit looked like a static telly. It was yellow and like yellow and black. Yellow and black.
It looked like a fakey Bumblebee effort for the 90s, eh?
Aye, it was horrible.
Joined up the stripes right, whoever stitched it all together. You know what I mean? It was terrible.
It was horrible. It was a horrible away kit, one of the worst. And when we speak about Tony Stokes after this, there seems to be an awful lot of horrible away kits during his period when he played for Celtic. Because when you watch his YouTube videos, he's wearing some horrendous away kits, but scoring some great goals in them. So Stokes brings us back into the game with a cracking free kick. And he scored quite a lot of free kicks for Celtic.
More than capable of it.
He was more than capable. And he had that sort of, when he actually took the free kick, he laid right back and he got the ball up and over. He had a low centre of gravity. It was almost as if somebody was holding him up. He then scored a second one, which was a great strike from about 22, 23 yards out. And by this point, you can actually see the Celtic fans behind it going absolutely mental, and Neil Lennon's out in the touchline shouting, "Come on," and getting at all that, which he was still doing this season, actually. And we get a free kick. It gets whipped in. Daniel Mastorovic headers the ball across the face of the goal. And Charlie Mulgrew, with a half-diving header, bangs it into the back of the net. It's free each. It's free each with 12 minutes to go. So now, we're romantic Celtic fans. I'm sure every Celtic fan, apart from me, who's up on a plane at this point, no kenning what's happening, I'm sure if I was in the ground at that point, I'll be going, there's 12 minutes left. We're winning this 4-3, no problem. We've got this. We're Glasgow Celtic. This will happen, eh? It didn't. And we were really, really lucky that Paul Heffernan missed an absolute sitter for Kilmarnock in the last minute.
He'd scored one of their goals today, so you would have thought, confidence high. But I suppose it shows you when you've been 3-0 up and it's got back to at one point, Kilmarnock players would have been sitting there at half-time thinking, we're on the brink here of one of the most famous results in this club's history. Do you know what I mean? No exaggeration. So with the fans. 3-0 up at half-time, Celtic are on their knees. This could get more, And it just shows you how much that would knock the stuffing at you. Do you know what I mean? When it gets back to the 3-0, how that can drain not just the team's confidence, but actually the individuals themselves. Because like you say, if that chance, we'll put it this way, that chance presents itself to him in the first half, what happens?
It goes in because he scored an offside goal in the first half.
Yeah.
The goal was offside in the first half. And you can see it when he actually scores. He looks at the linesman as if to go, are you actually going to give that goal?
Really?
He looks at the linesman for about a good 4 or 5 seconds as he's running away. He's like, are you going to give that offside? Because he was a yard offside for that goal. Is it over the top massively over the top to say Anthony Stokes, with his second-half performance, saved Neil Lennon's job. And if it wasn't from Anthony Stokes, Neil Lennon wouldn't have achieved what he achieved at Celtic.
Certainly, I think Stokes played the biggest part in that second half, Kev. And I certainly don't think it's an exaggeration to say Neil Lennon probably would have been out of job. I'm struggling to think how he would have, if we got beat, especially in the manner it was looking like it was going to be. I think it's important to put that in there as well. Because we all know how Lennon got the gig. Obviously, when Tony Mowbray got humped, 4-0 or 4-1, whatever it was, against St Mirren. I think if that had carried on going down the road to 3-0, potentially even extended in the second half, for me, there's no way back there. Absolutely no way back. I mean, we need to be sensible. I mean, he only won one more point than what he would have if we'd lost. If we'd lost, it was only an extra point when we really did need all three. Such was the gap already. But the manner of the comeback gave folk the belief. Maybe Lennon, maybe they're all still playing for. They're all working together here. It's a unit. We all still believe. But I think you've got to be realistic and say whether it was Tony Stokes was the main catalyst, shall we say, in that second half, definitely. But it's not too far-fetched to say Neil Lennon would have been out of job come the Monday. I don't think that's too far-fetched or over-dramatising it. And if it is over-dramatising it, anyone, that's what we're here to do.
I know, definitely. We're here to revise history and for you lot not to take us too serious. Albert Bramble gets into the mood of this podcast and says Stokes has got a lot to answer for then. Well, maybe. That's a very good point. That is a very good point. If you have a look at Tony Stokes, I mean, that's probably up there as one of these mythical moments where Mark Robins saving Alex Ferguson at Man United. Alex Ferguson always says if Mark Robins hadn't scored that goal against Norwich, was it, or Nottingham Forest in the FA Cup, he would have been out of job as well. Next thing you know, Ferguson creates a dynasty. But so it is up there with one of those goals, and you didn't get. If anybody in the comments has got any more examples of Mark Robins or Tony Stokes saving a manager's job and they then go on to unprecedented success, let us know. Mark Robins was the first one that came into my mind there. But if you have a look at Tony Stokes, when he signed for Arsenal when he was 15, onlookers claimed he was the most talented player ever to come out of Ireland at that point when he signed for Arsenal when he was 16. And Roy
obviously they hadn't seen Paddy McCourt by then, in fairness as well.
No.
They obviously didn't know who Paddy McCourt was, so we need to take that with a wee bit of pinch of salt.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what Wikipedia tell me, because that's the level of my research that goes into this. That's what Wikipedia tell me. Also at the time, when Roy Keane was manager of Sunderland, Roy Keane says about Tony Stokes, the player could be a top player playing in Northern League in 5 years' time. And I think that sums up Tony Stokes' career, that he's always had that ability, but something's never quite happened for him. I mean, he went from Arsenal to Falkirk on loan, and he first came to my knowledge at Falkirk, where he scored 16 goals in 18 games for Falkirk, including 3 hat-tricks in a row. He also scored...
Was that under John Hughes?
Under John Hughes, He also scored a goal, a League Cup game at Celtic Park when Falkirk put us out the League Cup that year, 5-4 on penalty kicks. We drew one each in normal time, and it was Stokes that scored the goal against Celtic Park. So his loan spell ended in that January, and it looked like he was going to come to Celtic. It really did. It looked like Celtic were going to make the bid and get him. But Stokes followed his Irish influence and moved to Sunderland for £2 million, where Roy Keane was the manager. He started well down there. He started well down at the Stadium of Light, because it would have been the Stadium Light at that time. But he ended up going to Sheffield United on loan. He ended up going to Crystal Palace on loan. And he eventually moved back to Hibs for £500,000 in August 2009. And when he moved back to Hibs, I remember thinking, there's still a player there. He is a talented football player. So he's only at Hibs a year. He has a great season at Hibs again. And eventually he makes a move to us for $1.2 million in August 2010. Now, I'm going to read. So he was there for 5 years. And I'm going to read what he actually achieved with Celtic, because when I wrote this down, I didn't realise he had achieved so much. He scored 76 goals. He's got 4 League Winners' medals, 2 Scottish Cup Winners' medals, and 1 League Cup Winners' medal with Celtic. He's also got another Scottish Cup Winners' medal with Hibs. With Hibs. But when you think back on it, I watched a YouTube video of Tony Stokes at Celtic, and some of the goals that he scored were fantastic. It's all technique. He always seems to get the ball on the left-hand side of the box and cut in on his right foot and stroke it by goalkeepers. He's also got that little drop of the shoulder and going in and out of players. And he had a great partnership with Gary Hooper. And I think maybe his role is underlooked because we all loved Gary Hooper. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's fair. I think Hooper as well was just that bit more prolific. I think Hooper was more capable of scoring a total variety of goals. Well, I think Hooper was able to get in the 6-yard box and scored a lot, probably most close range goals than what Stokes did, but was more than capable outside the box. We always think Stokes' goals, not that they all would be. I mean, if we went through the archive, I'm sure there's loads of examples to prove me wrong right now, but when you think of Stokes' goals, I'm very much like you. I always think of the most spectacular sort of goals. And then one of the funny things about that spell, right, that he's had his most successful spell at Celtic, and we're talking about a guy whose professionalism is questioned a lot. Do you know what I mean? Or he's lacking. He's not a good temperament to be, off field, to be dedicating his life as an athlete and things like that. And yet Neil Lennon was his manager, that period. And it's the exact same stuff that you accuse Neil Lennon in his second spell at Celtic of not being able to, take seriously enough for the current crop. And yet you've got an example there of someone who's a bit of a, someone who maybe doesn't take his career as seriously as he should because of his ability and the talent that he's got, but actually the best he was and the most dedicated he was and the most professional spell of his career, which brought out the best, ratio of goals and all these trophies that you've just discussed there, was actually under Neil Lennon. So Neil Lennon deserves credit for that, in fairness. As we've got to be balanced sometimes. We've got to give credit where it's due, and fair dues, he's certainly got a fantastic tune out to Tony Stokes, and they seem to work well together, and you can kind of see why Lennon wanted to bring him back to Hibs. Of course, it was funny because when they met up, it was over a pint of Guinness. Remember the photo in the newspaper? It's wow. But no, totally underrated, probably to a point. When you read out everything that you just said there, a wee bit of an unsung hero.
It probably was, and there's a goal that he scored against Hibs in the recycled Bumblebee, which is an overhead kick from the corner of the box, which was it's an utterly fantastic goal. And there's another, it wasn't a goal, but remember Shakhtar Karagandhi, Champions League, when he breaks into that box and he squares it back for James Forrest to score in the last minute. That's some bit of ability at that point of a game. He played on instinct. He seemed to be an instinctive player, and maybe that's been his problem, that he went with instinct out with football as well, with some things that have actually happened during his career.
See, just what you were saying there, though, Kev, just a wee slightly different avenue. I know we'll probably go way over the time again, as always, but just when you were saying there about the transfer fees there. Now, I was a wee bit taken aback that he joined Hibs for £500,000. I presumed he joined them on a free transfer. Now, what does that say, and why is it that the Scottish clubs, people talk about Mickey Mouse League and all that nonsense, or the gap's too big. I actually feel at times Scottish clubs don't help themselves. Why on earth would you invest a huge fee for Hibs, which it is, £500,000? The boy absolutely smashes it, and within a year you sell him for just 1.2. Now, people could talk about the percentages of that and whether it's more than double what they paid. Nonsense. We're still talking about £1.2 million, though, which they are. It is going to be almost an impossibility for them to get a player of that ability again in for that. And secondly, you're selling it to a club that, let's be honest, are competing for the Champions League. They're entering the Champions League. You're talking about these games back then. They've got money in the bank. They're in the same league as you. I think it's time that Scottish clubs maybe get a wee bit more self-respect with that and stop flogging your players for so little, because that one doesn't make sense. Because for Hibs to do an outlay of £500,000, that's what's making me think this. If they got him for free, fair dues. But if they got him for $500,000 the year before, he smashes it for a year, why would you sell him to a league rival for only 1.2? It just seems...
I can't remember round about that time if there was a lot of debating going on, like arguing with Hibs over the fee. I just seem to remember just thinking it was always written in the stars that he was going to play for Celtic, and it was a transfer that was always going to happen. And
yeah, I get that.
But I do get what you're saying about the transfer fees. I think clubs sometimes do sell their talent too cheap, and I'm including us in that at times as well.
100%.
I think the money, when you look at what Aberdeen got for some of their players this season, is actually decent money. But you've got to remember that the money that Aberdeen got for, what's that big coup, a centre-half that was always linked with us? Can't I remember? It looks like McKenna, he looks like a side of a tractor. McKenna. I think Aston Villa offered £6 million for him last season ago, and I think they ended up getting 2 or 3. So the money is there, and people are looking at Scotland, and you can only hope that will be a domino effect of Brexit. That the English clubs will start looking at the Scottish market for talent.
Exactly, because it might be one that, you've only got so far you can look, guys. You know what I mean? So if you want them, start charging the right dollars. There was one that annoyed me as well. Not because we need to go in on it for ages. I've just been like, but it was always Liam Boyce, I think, had finished top scorer in the SPL. And he was sold for $500,000 to Burton. I just thought, $500,000 for your league's top scorer, the Premier League's top scorer. What does that signal is that as well? Not that their responsibility is other clubs, but what does that message send though to the clubs that are the vultures down south that are looking up here? If the top scorer of the league is £500,000, you know what I mean? That wasn't even long ago, 5 years, 6 years.
It's quite weird that there's a lot of comments coming in about Lee Griffiths and Tony Stokes getting boxed in the same package. And they did form a decent partnership in one season. I think it was 2014. I used to call it the partnership of receding hairlines, because they're probably the two baldest centre forwards that we've ever had, who were still in their 20s at that point. And there is and there is a video with them getting the hair transplant on YouTube. Both of them got a hair transplant at the same time. There is a video on YouTube. I'm not making that up. So Stokes left in June 2016, and he went to Blackburn on a free. And I think Paul's put up, he's had 5 clubs in 3 years and only played 37 games. Wow. 37 games since he's left Celtic. 5 clubs in 3 years since leaving Hibs. He has played 37 games in that period. So there you go.
And you know something as well? He must have been his peak then as well. 29, 30, 31. I know. He's only been 31, 32 there. He's
32 just now. He's 32 just now.
There you go.
That season, Celtic also signed Mo Bangura from IAK Stockholm. And so Mo Bangura comes with not a massive reputation, but a highly decent YouTube video. A great YouTube video, which I recently watched. And he's got everything. He's got pace, he's got power, he can score in the air, he can score for the edge of the box, he can out-muscle defenders, he can play defence splitting passes. He's got the lot, and he's got the build of a middleweight boxer. So, and he's also come to us recommended by the King of Kings, allegedly. So he turns up to Celtic Park, and his first interview, he's talking about only being here a year, then going to Spain or England because he's going to smash the league up. He's going to be absolutely great. And he was like, fantastic. The interview is there. What's the interview? Right. He's talking about going to La Liga. He's talking about going to England within a year. So the guy had confidence, he really believed in himself. He left Celtic after only playing 16 games and scoring 1 goal in a friendly against Steaua Bucharest. Now, at that time in front of him, you had the Hooper-Stokes partnership. But really, he didn't really show anything whatsoever in a Celtic jersey. He came on a couple of times as a sub. I remember a game where he was that bad, he actually went to mark a defender that was being subbed off the park. He ran after the defender, thinking the keeper was going to play the bottom, and the defender was getting subbed.
That's amazing.
That is a true story. That's a true story. He wasn't even paying attention. he just chased his boy.
That's very good. I heard the story though that apparently it was not his brother that was the good one.
No. That's another one of these myths that we've got to dispel. He played up front with another Bangura, Tita Bangura. And they had a great partnership, and both of them had a fantastic. They looked completely different. They didn't look alike, and everybody says, "Oh, we had signed the wrong Bangura." That's a load of rubbish. Strangely enough, Tita Bangura's 31 and hasn't had a team since 2017. And Mo Bangura hasn't had a team since 2018 and is only 31.
This boy does his homework.
And is only 31 as well. So Tony Stokes is 32. Hasn't got a team as well. So there's maybe something about strikers at Celtic at that period which sees them go off the rails and no play into the former part of their careers. Some great comments came in, and I'm going to actually go back to one of them. Somebody mentioned Stefan Skefovic and somebody mentioned Amido Balde. I would say Bangura on paper is worse than them because Skefovic scored a couple of first-team goals in competitive games, as did Amido effing Balde, who scored a great goal against Liverpool in a friendly, and also a day I'll never forget for Hull when I think he steamrolled through the defence and scored a fantastic goal. So I would say Bangura is probably worse than those two, just because of the fact that they actually scored competitive goals for Celtic. Timo Pukki, he scored a competitive goal for Celtic as well and has went on to have a decent career. Shifche, he was fantastic. He was fantastic for Dundee United. I don't know where he is just now. Did he not play for Motherwell a couple of years back?
I think he did.
I think he played for Motherwell a couple of years back. Barca Boy says, where's Bayo in that chat? Well, we can't really review Bayo because he's still our player.
He's still in Toulouse. Toulouse scored him the other week.
So the chances are he might come back. Ian McIntosh says Mark Anton Fortuny. I'm not having that. Fortuny was a decent player as well, who went on to play for Wigan for 3 seasons after he left us. So he hasn't done a Bangura and completely different, completely disappeared. Bangura ended up going back to Sweden. He also played against us in a Champions League qualifier against Elfsborg, and Elfsborg were complete and utter bombs regarding that and actually made him play. And I remember that night at Celtic Park, the Celtic support absolutely booed him. And strangely enough, he had a decent game that night. He had a decent game over the 2 legs against Celtic when he played for Elfsborg. So Bangura's another one of these many project signings that have never turned out for Celtic.
Yep, couldn't agree more.
Never.
The list is endless. The list is endless. Sometimes you look at that. You know, the name that you said there that really got me was Skepovic. Stefan Skepovic. I forgot about him.
Signed from a La Liga B team.
Yes.
Real something.
Almeria was it, or Albuquerque or something?
It could well be, aye. And I'm sure he's probably back. I'm sure he left us and went back to the team that we signed him on.
Not any expense for them.
Aye. Ewan Boy Martin, I'm going to say this, he comes in with Wayne Biggins. And so, aye, Biggins, but what I'm actually going to say is Jim Orr, who's on a Friday with us, he calls this the Wayne Biggins World Show. For all you 90s kids out there who remember Wayne's World. So he calls me and Russell, he calls Screamacelica the Wayne Biggins World Show. If you find that funny, I found it funny. Paul comes in with Skefovic's dad played for Partizan Belgrade when we drew 6 each with them. That which is true. And Ivan Golak was the manager of Partizan Belgrade that night as well.
That was the Dundee United boss, wasn't it?
So there you go. Quickly, because we want to get to the music. Quickly. If Tony Stokes doesn't turn it round and we lose to Kilmarnock that day, if Paul Heffernan scores in the last minute and we do get beat, what do you reckon would have happened next? Who do you think the next Celtic manager would have been? Now, before you go into it, go into it, who was the next Celtic manager going to be?
Roberto Martinez.
Right.
So, irony being he would be the absolute dream appointment now. And in 2011, Roberto Martinez was probably slightly unfancied by a large section of the Celtic support, who I, from my memory anyway, believe a lot of them probably thought Owen Coyle would be maybe a better bet for the Celtic gig than Roberto Martinez, which is frightening. Martinez, I believe, was just working his magic at Swansea at the time.
He had moved to Wigan.
Has he just moved to Wigan? So he left
Swansea.
Swansea up. He'd been there League 2, League 1. He left in the Championship in a playoff spot, I think, when Rodgers took over. Mm-hmm. I wasn't sure what the timeline was there. But he'd certainly left the foundations for Mr. Rodgers to take over and have, and don't get me wrong, Brendan Rodgers capitalised on it, but that is, that's a T. You can imagine him doing that. But I think at that point, Martinez's work at Swansea, well, isn't it funny? Because you could probably argue it's the same arguments probably getting made about someone like Eddie Howe. He's only worked at Bournemouth. He's only worked through the leagues at that. I think people are forgetting, what legacy he's leaving at the clubs, what future-proof planning he's made at those clubs, what terms of their mindset, what their whole football and philosophy is going forward, the brand of football, the youth setup, everything that he was involved in these clubs. I mean, he had really set the foundations, I think, for Swansea to go on to become an English Premier League club for I think it was 7, 8, 9 years maybe that Swansea were up there for. Mm-hmm. I could be wrong, 7 years? 7? Sounds about right. I certainly think he played a huge part in that. And I think it is easy to turn your nose up at the time at this sort of thing. But you're in leagues, remember, I think people forget down there, that have, even in League 2, clubs that are spending more money than some of the SPL teams. Not all of them. Half of them, say. You get to League 1, and you're looking at the vast majority of League 1 teams are spending more money than almost all the SPL teams. You know what I mean? Bar now 3 or 4. In these leagues are 24 teams. The competition is fierce.
It's a slog, that league. An absolute slog.
The room for error, Kev, is where folk forget how that's the margin for error. You think, what is it they say about how many players are on free? I look at all this stuff that are free agents in the summer, right? In England, it's like sometimes they're saying like 20% of or 30% even of like actual PFA members are on the free. You think how easy it would be to sign 5 players that turn into duds in that sort of environment when you're working your way out of there, or the flip it, how difficult it is to turn them into gems, how difficult it is to turn guys like Leon Britton into the player that he was. That's his name, the Swansea midfielder. All like that. And he did it with a Dutch boy as well, Ferry Bode. I remember Martinez had completely turned him into a phenomenal midfielder, and he was just hampered by injury. And I just think in those leagues, we need to be a wee bit more open-minded than that. If it had been a Howe who got the job. I don't see it now because I think he would have been hired by now, to be honest to you. But we shouldn't be up, above or turning our nose up at achievements of working your way up through those leagues. Particularly if you're doing it in the brand of football that Martinez was. Because it's so ballsy to do that in those leagues. Over a 46-game season, you're just playing total football, if you want to call it that, and it's working. And you're promoting youth, and you're playing. It was amazing what he did there. And to think that, a lot of fans would prefer Owen Coyle is just madness. And, you fast forward 10 years, what will be saying about Eddie Howe in 10 years? It's just a like-for-like example, by the way. I'm not saying it'll be the same. If Eddie Howe's in charge of Belgium in 10 years, and wow.
Now, what you've got to remember is before we appointed Tony Mowbray, we offered Martinez the job in 2009, but he decided to move to Wigan. And so he was 2 years into the Wigan project when Lennon, if Tony Stokes hadn't saved Neil Lennon, would have got sacked. So we're 2 years into that. And I was having a look back to see who was on the list when we appointed Tony Mowbray, because we still would have been working for that same list 2 years later, and it absolutely seems that we're still working for the same list when you actually see the names that were linked in 2009 to the names that are currently being linked. It makes me think that Dermot has got this folder, one of the peach-based ones, like cardboard, and it's in a filing cabinet, and it's in his filing cabinet, and his London getaway, and he goes up every so often, and he gets his folder out, and he goes, right, Roberto Martinez, Roy Keane, Owen Coyle, what are they doing now? Because Roberto Martinez and Roy Keane have been linked with the Celtic job every time since 2009. So it must be the same list. They must be just having a look at the same list. In 2009, I'm going to say, if Neil Lennon had been sacked at that point, I reckon the Celtic support would have accepted Roy Keane at that point. I really. 2011, I reckon we did. He was at Ipswich at that point. He could still love off winning the championship with Sunderland and having a decent run in the English Premier League with them. He's went to Ipswich. Ipswich are a basket case of the club. They're loaded with debt, and he eventually leaves Ipswich in June 2012. So he was already nearly at the end of his tether. I think if Celtic would have offered Roy Keane the job at that point, he would have took it. And the Celtic support would have accepted it. Mm-hmm. But no, that didn't happen. Tony Stokes saved Neil Lennon. And this is what I'm going to say. This is completely off topic. But we end up going top of the league, I think, when we beat Rangers on the 28th of December. Joe Ledley scored the header. I think we ended up on top of the league at that point. 28th of December. And
what's that turnaround that is, eh?
It is. And I reckon I met you on the 28th of December 2011. Reason being, I watched that game in your pub.
Did you?
I watched that game in the Crooked Arm. I was at a wedding along the road, and I left the wedding to come and watch the football.
That's amazing.
And I reckon you probably threw me out, but there you go.
Really? No.
I'm only winding you up, but I reckon that was the first time Wow. Because if anybody's the ken, I've never met Boyce in real life. I've only met him virtually. But I think that night I would have at least spoke to you.
Definitely you would have. 100%.
That came back to me. That came back to me when I was
I would have been there 100%. Well, I would 100% have been there, no two ways.
Remember a group of guys in Celtic kilts watching the football, no?
I know they're going to get on the music in a minute, man. But I could do my memoirs in those 6 years, pal. You know what I mean? I'm telling you, I get pops over that looking, man.
Lust for life, mate. Lust for life. Right, music, 49 minutes. This seems to be the hangman. Let's get to music. This gets to music. Right. number one in the charts on the 15th of October was Sam Allardyce's favourite song, We Found Love by Rihanna. Number two, reminds me of you, mate, Moves Like Jagger by Maroon 5.
I've seen that. That's one of those songs I sang it as soon as I seen it in the list of the charts. Though I did sing it straight away as soon as I said, "Bastard." That's stuck in my head, man. Straight away.
Bromance, aye. Fair enough. Number one album was The Awakening by James Morrison. I'm not too sure if that was the James Morrison who played for West Bromwich Albion in Scotland. And number two in the charts was 21 by Adele. Again, pass. Strangely enough, there was a couple of old albums in the charts at that time. At number 11 was Nevermind by Nirvana. It must have been re-released for some reason. Number ones by the Beatles was also in the charts. And at number 26 was the classic Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. Now, Russell, to everybody listening here, you listened to Dark Side of the Moon for the first time this afternoon. We says to you, you've got to listen to this album. Well, I says to you, you've got to listen to that album.
I put on the good headphones, man. I was like, right, give them their due, get the Marshalls on. I was like, right, get engrossed in this, man, while I make my lunch. And the first track was like a minute long, and I quite like that. They're making a vibe here, I get it. Track number two, man, all I could picture was Ross Geller and Friends, man, when he got his keyboard out and he starts making all the noises and he doesn't know what he's doing.
Oh, man.
I know that's going to break folks' hearts, but I was just picturing going, making me noises. I was like, come on, get it. And then after that, I thought there was a tune that was, the third song was like, it was a bit slower paced, but there was a good melody to it, and I thought, fair enough. But for me, I don't know, man. I don't know. I just think they're trying a wee bit too hard, if I'm being honest with you.
Oh, Russell, it sold 45 million copies. I can sometimes that means doesn't mean.
You can't use that argument both ways.
I can. It doesn't sometimes mean the album good, but I agree with somebody actually says it. Who was it? Where is it? Somebody says it's not even Pink Floyd's best album. I agree with that. Pink Floyd's best album is David Kelly. There it is. Pink Floyd's best album is Wish You Were Here for me. Mm-hmm. This at me in the comments.
I was hoping that was going to be on it. I was kind of looking for that. Right. I might just skip to that one because I know it. So, Dark Side of the Moon is a concept album, and I love these albums. And me, you, and Paul were discussing this earlier on, and I get right into albums. I love albums, and you're going, no, I just like playlists and stuff like that. I just like songs. But Dark Side of the Moon talks about the human experience, man. It talks about like conflict, grief, time, death, and sanity, and you can hear that all in it. And see, by the time Brain Damage comes on, the second song for the end, Russell, the second song for the end. If you're not punching the air and the hairs are not standing on the back of your neck, standing up on the back of your neck, for me, you're clinically dead. There's something up with you if that doesn't happen, I listened to Dark Side. First time I saw it, Pink Floyd had a live album called Pulse, and it was a live video at that time. And did they do it live, like in front of folk? Were they hiding behind the curtain, or what was the script then?
No, they done it live in front. This was filmed in 1990s. This video, but they did actually do Dark Side of the Moon the year before it was released. They done it live, and there is actually a bootleg kicking about of the Dark Side of the Moon before they actually went to Abbey Road and recorded it. So. It was Pulse, that's what it was called, and like they done a Dark Side of the Moon like segment of life, and I went like that. Wow, that's unbelievable. That's absolutely great. I love this album. See, listening to that, I listened to it today again, It is absolutely fantastic, and one of the...
Some bits are a bit weird, no?
Obviously, it's 1973, mate. They're all taking psychedelics. They're all like...
Are they?
It's like space rock. It's Hawkwind. It's meant to be... but it's no... It is prog. It's probably the start of prog, but it's no Emerson, Lake and Palmer prog where it's 25 minutes dressed as wizards standing underneath waterfalls playing a keyboard. It's no that. It's no that prog, but I can't believe today is the first day, the only time that you ever heard The Dark Side of the Moon.
I knew some of the tunes, Right, they've been played in my jukebox and all that. Do you know what I mean? And I've kind of like...
Well, that's what I was about to say to you. Like, surely you heard Dark Side of the Moon on the jukebox.
Like when folk were getting carried away when they were drunk and that, I'd be like going, aye, man, tune, man, that. You want another beer, mate? You know what I mean? Just like kind of like humouring it a wee bit. So I did recognise a couple of the tunes. I did. That's honest truth.
I'm the guy who goes to the jukebox and puts on Us and Them because it's 7 minutes long just to get my money's worth.
That's so true, man. People do that. People do that, definitely. That is so true.
Zinco comes in. Us and Them is fantastic. On the Run on Acid is truly frightening. We'll take your word for that, Zinco. We will take your word for that. So... Well, you go back and listen to any... I recommend that you go back and listen to all the Pink Floyd back catalogue. Go to Wish You Were Here next. But for me, Dark Side of the Moon is great.
No, I get it, man. Well, I don't get it, but I get where you're coming from. It's obviously it's important music. It's got a bigger place in society with all the amount of sales it's got and all that. And obviously it's got its, you know... It's got its adoration from a lot of people and that. But I mean, I don't know. I'm just maybe like a wee right simpleton mind when it comes to stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? I felt a lot of it went over my head as to, what you doing? That is just like at times it was like, well, I don't know why they're doing that. I wasn't trying to be negative. I just thought at times I was like, play the tune or no? Come on.
It's one of those albums that has to be played from start to finish. I don't think you can dip in and dip back out yet.
Sure.
It's one of those, if you want to get its full width and its full sonic beauty, then you've got to actually listen to it from start to finish. With a decent pair of bins on and get on with it, I think you need to actually do that. And that's the same with a lot of the Pink Floyd stuff. Plus, Roger Waters, who wrote the majority of that album, is a big Tim. He backed up the Green Brigade a couple of years ago and showed the Palestine protest as his backdrop on his recent live solo tour as well. If you know your history, Russell, have you heard Tommy? That's a rock opera, mate. Tommy by The Who. Again, I went to see The Who and I really loved the bit that they done with Tommy. I'm not really a great Tommy fan, but I'm a massive Quadrophenia fan, which is also a rock opera. A massive Quadrophenia fan is an album as well. Right, that's enough of me with my old fuddy-duddy dad music. What album have you picked that was at that point?
I'm a one-trick pony, Kevin. I mean, I'm going to get found out on this show, you know what I mean? I'm going to be resorting to all sorts just to try and know a few songs on an album. I mean, the disclaimer is, I don't actually listen to albums, you know, I just wanted to get on the show, guys. That's all it was. And now we're in week 4, they can't get rid of me, so I'm sorry. I went for Noel Gallagher's High Flying debut album, which I know we talked about Oasis a couple of weeks ago, but this was obviously a big, bold move because it was Noel Gallagher's decision to leave. Still probably the biggest rock and roll band in Britain at the time. In fact, they were. He wanted to leave, and obviously he thought there was a hunch that he had songs up his sleeve that he had grown sick and tired of giving like half of them for his brother to sing. Do you know what I mean? I think his ego got the better of him at times. I think he forgot that his most successful album, his debut album, was all sang by Liam. So he wanted anyway a piece of the pie. And the album itself, it was weird, because I actually think it was exactly what the next Oasis album would have just sounded like, probably. Just with Noel singing the songs instead of Liam. I think there's 2 tracks on it that really stood out when we listened back to that this morning, and that was the opening track, which is
Everybody's on the Run.
Everybody's on the Run. I mean, what a tune that is. He uses the Crouching Choir, I think it is, at that point as well, to great effect in the background. He ended up playing quite a lot live with them. I think they'd played with Oasis live for the Electric Proms, and then he kept them for recording that song. But Everybody's on the Run is an amazing tune. And then If I Had a Gun, which I think is, to me, what I want to hear when I listen to Noel Gallagher. I want to hear Noel Gallagher doing Noel Gallagher songs. I'm not interested in him broadening his horizons for the sake of it and wearing dog tags and that and shaking his hips these days. I mean, it's just embarrassing. I want to hear him do songs that sound like him, that he's good at. And If I Had a Gun, for me, is just a perfect stereotypical Noel Gallagher song at his very best. There's a good lines in it and stuff like that. When he talks about eyes have always followed you around the room. I'm like, that's just good, mate. I actually think when you listen to the album, though, it's very much a game of 2 halves, Kev. A bit like, the same sport Celtic play. I think the first half of the album is extremely strong. I do feel, for me, it fades a wee bit the second half of the album. And Stop the Clocks, I don't know if you remember, they called the Greatest Hits, Oasis called the Greatest Hits Stop the Clocks, and it was all based on they were going to throw this track in as part of it, because Noel Gallagher had this faith in this song for years and years, was going to be, boom, Stop the Clocks was going to be this huge Noel Gallagher tune, and it was a major, major disappointment.
For me, there's a lot of stuff on that on his debut album that you can actually hear Liam singing. I mean, what a life! I can just picture Liam singing that, and there's a couple of times that you hear him. You just want Liam to come in and rip it up.
I think that's right. I think that was missing from it at times, and it was really interesting because I remember I was engrossed at the time. Well, still am to an extent, do you know what I mean? But I think it was really intriguing to see what they were going to do. And you're reading every interview between the 2 at the time because you wanted to know what the mindset was at the time, what their state of mind was, and all that. And I remember Liam Gallagher saying, he's talking about, wanting to be in his own new musical journey or whatever he says. And Liam goes, I've heard half them songs. He's not on any new musical journey. He's been rehearsing them and doing sound checks for years, a lot of them. So he wasn't quite reinventing himself, as much as what Noel wanted to kid on he was. I think it probably was just a case of, I've got good enough songs for Oasis, but it'd just be nice for me to sing them myself. Whereas now he's went, not that we're talking about that, but now he's, I don't know, I think some of his new stuff's been, just stop, mate. Just cut that nonsense right out. You know what I mean? That's just not happening.
I've been recorded as saying, and I'm not going to deny this now, I've been recorded as saying that I reckoned every BDI album was better than Noel's solo stuff. And I did say that. But me and Paul were going to do something, and it probably will still happen. And we went back and revisited all those albums. And I must admit, I've got a greater appreciation of the Noel solo stuff now than probably what I did have a couple of years ago. But I agree with you that his first solo album is a bit like a lot of the later Oasis albums. First great half, then it tails right off. Tails right off at the second half. I mean, if we go back to the Dark Side of the Moon, do you actually realise the Dark Side of the Moon ends with a heartbeat on both sides? Because we got the LPs, and there's a heartbeat on both sides because it's about the human condition. So there you go, man. There you go.
I like that, man. No, that's good. I like that, Kev. It was a good time, man. I mean, I think when you look back as well, it probably got, I think, stuff like that, it's easy to slate it because they're there to be shot at people like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're that big that there was nowhere he could go. Noel Gallagher was never going to go, oh, by the way, do you know what? Genuinely, I think this is better than Def Leppard. Maybe no. It was not going to happen. It was always going to be compared, contrasted, and then I think at that point he was winning the PR war massively. I think he was coming over. I think he'd created a narrative that didn't exist in reality, but he had everyone, all the media, like Gordon Smart, all those idiots. Do you know what I mean? I don't actually think he's an idiot, by the way. I've spoken to him a few times. He's sound. But, I mean, they were so far up his backside, do you know what I mean? That, you know, he was just telling them anything. You know, oh, I couldn't go on another day from your wee brother. Oh, shut up, man. You know what I mean? Like, I feel so threatened in that. Give me peace. I've got a wee brother 5 years younger than me. You know what I mean? I never, ever I feel like, oh, this is all too much. And me and the family are really worried about him. And they're like, calm down. It's just nonsense. You know what I mean? You don't need to go that far. You could have just said, I want to have a solo album and bolt. You know what I mean?
Aye. I'll go through some of the comments here. Ewan Boy Martin, Oasis or the Stone Roses, Russell?
Oasis by 10 million miles. They didn't bottle it.
I'm the Stone Roses. I've got lyrics to my arms of the Stone Roses. So I'm a Stone Roses man. Have you ever, the dude Abides says the band, the night they drove Old Dixie down. You ever heard that?
Say that again?
The dude Abides, that's the name of the guy in the comments. He says, have you ever heard the band doing the night they drove Old Dixie down?
The night they all drove Old Dixie down rings a bell.
Uh-huh.
That's ringing a bell.
It's a fantastic song. The band were Bob Dylan's backing band. And there's an album, actually, my dad, who put me onto the band. The band are fantastic. I would recommend anybody that's never listened to the band, go and listen to that. The band, what was the name? The Last Waltz.
Aye. That producer is so biased. It's unreal. Look at every comment he's putting up. Stone Roses. Thinks I'm daft. Huh?
The Roses sold out. Disagree. I don't know if Paul brought up the comment there, but the other show that the State of Mind does is the Salt and Sauce show. And as Paul says, by the way, Bez is on the Salt and Sauce chat show this Friday. So
that's legendary.
So
I mean, folk watching this, you've got to say, Kev, do you know what I mean? Like, folk watching this show right now, if they like that, there's only one place to be Friday to see an interview with Bez on this platform as well. I think that's amazing.
Mm-hmm. The Roses are overrated. I think that I'm not having that. I would argue all day about the Stone Roses. I've seen Oasis, double figures. I've seen Oasis, and when I saw the Stone Roses at Glasgow Green, I've never seen such reverential greeting of a band. It was almost like a religious experience. I've seen Oasis send crowds mental, but I've never felt that.
Here's my argument, right? Here's my argument. I remember saying this before. See whatever records the Stone Roses created when they did that reunion gig, Oasis will obliterate them. And that is only by being away half the time. And see, if you want to talk about greeting and all that, trust me, it will be tenfold, especially with the songs that Oasis will be singing, the way you see at Glasgow Green. That'll be when that debate gets completely just destroyed once and for all. When they come back, they'll come back compared to the Stone Roses one, and the Stone Roses one was a record-breaking one. Those records will be absolutely blown to pieces, man. I'm telling you.
I'm not going to deny that but it's going to be the majority of the same folk that are going to go to bay for them. If it ever happens, I mean, there is a rumour that they've set up a production company. Which I think is probably more to do with a Freddie Mercury type biopic than an actually get together. I don't know right. Final question before we end. If Oasis got back together, what's your lineup?
For me, it would be the older one. But I think Andy Bell and Noel Gallagher can't work together anyway. I think that's done. I think the comments they've made about each other since, it's quite obvious they had a real problem as well. Gem Archer's jumped from both ships, so he'll be in. There's no two ways. I mean, Gem Archer's seems to be all their best pals. And I don't think Liam would do it without Bonehead. And I think the good thing about Bonehead is Bonehead always had the ability to tell Noel to shut up. I think that's definitely what's needed. I think the boy go, shut up, mate. You know what I mean? Leave it out. And had a wee bit of respect. Do you know what I mean? But I think I agree with the original lineup. I would rather that, but with Alan White on drums, by the way, instead of the original drummer. No offence to him, because his book's very good. But I cannot see a way that Gem doesn't worm his way into that. I don't see how, because he's played with both of them, like BGI, High Flying Birds, a lot. So I think he would be involved somehow.
I think they've got a problem because I don't think Gwiggs would do it. I don't think Gwiggs is who stays in London, and me and Paul were told a story by, who was it? Paul will come in and tell me, who recorded an album in Gwiggs' studio in London, and he's basically a recluse. He doesn't do any. He doesn't. Paul Quinn recorded an album with Gwiggs, and he basically doesn't do any. He's not interested in doing anything to do with Oasis.
It's a shame though, because obviously, I mean, see, for me, someone like me, I don't get that, because I'm just like, I was getting to be playing with that many folk too, right? Like, I would be all over it like in a second. It wouldn't be too much for me. But it did seem in the 90s that he'd had to have a break and all that at one point as well. And everyone's different, I suppose. But for me, I'd be like, how many folk are playing? How many folk are going to be there, sorry? How much money? I'll see you there. I'll be there. That wouldn't bother me. I would love that.
Money usually talks. You could probably have them playing numerous nights with different lineups, playing an album each night or a set each night with different lineups.
That's not bad.
You could do that. Well, that's us an hour and 10 minutes. And this has been fantastic. I've enjoyed talking about Tony Stokes, enjoyed talking about Mo Bangura. There's been some strikers thrown in there that we would rather forget. I've enjoyed talking about the music, and me and Russell will see you again here next week at 6:30 on a Tuesday night, but we'll also see you for the Monday bulletin. And take care, everybody. See you later.